Alright, so we got our head cylinder back from the machine shop, and now it's time to put it back on. I just want to pause the video right here and just say, if you've made it this far into this series, please consider subscribing to my channel. Not only that, I do tutorials, we do shenanigans on this channel too. But other than that, let's get back to the video. But then again, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell notification, and like the video so people could see this and I don't know why I'm voiceovering this. I should just stop now. We got all the parts that we needed, which would be we got all the parts that we needed here, which is the headset, and it comes with everything that you need, which is the throttle body. Even it comes with valve stems and valve stem seals, just in case you were planning on rebuilding your head yourself. But we just took it in the machine shop to get it planed and cleaned. So from here on, we got all the gaskets we need. We got the new head bolts, and on top of that, we also got new head bolt washers. So let's begin. Now we're going to be cleaning out the block for any excess oil with a solvent. Acetone or brake cleaner works best, and we're going to be using a gasket scraper to remove any carbon buildup or old head gasket. Now we're putting on the new head gasket, and we're just making sure there's no manufacturer defects in the new head gasket, and definitely do this with your hands clean. Now we're placing on the cylinder head while we're also putting on the exhaust manifold gasket. Just make sure the exhaust manifold is loose enough where you don't damage the head while putting it straight on. Now I'm checking to make sure the placement is fine and all the dowels are sitting correctly. Now we're getting to the head cylinder bolts and washers. The washers are kind of a little finicky on this particular cylinder head, so you might have to put on the washer first, then the head cylinder bolt. Now, as a fair warning, I am not using this drill to torque down the bolts on the cylinder head, rather than just getting close to the cylinder head to save some time. If you are uncomfortable using a drill, do it by hand. Now here we have our torque specs to torque down our cylinder head, and the pattern that's required to torque down the cylinder head to the engine block. On this particular vehicle, we have to torque it down to 22 foot-pounds, turn them at a 90-degree angle, and then turn them again at another 90 degrees. Now, with experience with Toyota cylinder heads, I know how to turn these at a 90-degree turn, but if you're uncomfortable and you want to just get it perfect, definitely use a torque angle gauge. Now we're going for the second 90-degree turn, and let me just tell you this, it's a little bit harder than the first time. As you can see here, I already took out the camshaft bearings because we started looping up the cylinder head to put the camshafts back on. Now I'm putting on the camshaft bearings, that way when I go to the other side, I don't get these bearings mixed up. And one thing to note, when you're putting in these bolts in, just make sure they're dry, that way your torque doesn't get affected while torquing the bolts down. Before torquing the camshaft bearings, make sure the camshaft bearings are flush with the cylinder head, and you want to start from the middle and work your way out. Now I remove the bearings on the other side of the cylinder head and just pretty much repeat the same steps that I did to install the other camshaft. Now I promise you guys that these are all torqued down properly. Unfortunately my camera died, so here's a diagram of the torque specs. So as you can see here, I am putting on the timing chain, starting with the camshafts first. On this particular Toyota engine, it's best to start off with the camshaft, because once you get the timing chain on there, as you can see here me twisting it into place, it'll actually lock both of the camshafts. Now we have our timing chain tensioner, and we're holding it in by using our pick tool. Unfortunately, our camera didn't show it, but we put on our timing chain guides and put the timing chain back on the crankshaft. So now that we have our timing chain on, unfortunately I didn't show this in the camera, but we did turn the engine 4 times and we made sure all the timing marks came back to their appropriate place. I then put on the timing chain cover and the crankshaft pulley just to make sure the timing marks aligned. And once I was happy with the timing with the engine, I decided to take out the timing chain cover and the crankshaft pulley again so I could properly seal them onto the block. Now it's time to put the timing chain cover back on, so we're cleaning it with a rag with a solvent again, whether it's brake cleaner or acetone. Now I'm removing any RTV that's remaining on the block with the handy dandy gasket scraper. Now it's time to put new RTV on the timing chain cover. Definitely use the gray stuff or actually any RTV sealer that's meant for imports. Now these arrows are pointing at these little 2 circles here, then just make sure you don't put any RTV sealant on that because that sits on the block with O-rings. Now be extremely careful while putting on the timing chain cover just because you don't want to ruin that bead. On this particular vehicle we only had like half an inch of room and not even that, and yeah, it's a pretty tight fit on this vehicle. Now I got the timing chain cover as close to the engine and had them hanging right onto the water pump studs. That way I could align the oil pump to the crankshaft to have a proper fit. Now all we have to do is just put the bolts back on and torque down the timing chain cover. Now it's time for the water pump to go back on. Now since we completed the timing chain cover, this is the perfect opportunity to put back on the valve cover. Now before placing the valve cover onto the cylinder head, we just want to make sure that the cylinder head is clean enough just in case any engine assembly lube ended up on the top. Now just make sure you place the valve cover perfectly on the top. Now it's time for the motor mount to go back on. And here we're installing a brand new motor mount since the old one was completely busted. Here I am readjusting the jack, that way the motor is aligned with the new motor mount. The engine can hold itself up now, and it's no longer needed to use the jack. Now all the hard stuff is done, and all the little things like the fuel rail and everything like that needs to go back on. It's time for the valve cover to be torqued down, and you don't want to be going around in a whole entire circle, just trying to go crisscross and torque it down that way. Once I torqued down the valve cover with a torque wrench, it was time to put the AC compressor back on. And then I installed the dipstick back to the cylinder head. Then I went to the exhaust manifold to install the bolts and the exhaust shield. Now it's finally time to put on our intake manifold with our new intake manifold gasket. It's time for the spark plugs to go in. Here I am installing the throttle body with the new gasket. Now just cleaning some lines just because this engine is really dirty. And finally installing the last major part, which is the alternator. Now if you guys made it this far into the series, just enjoy this next few minutes.
Call me the Joker, call me the fool. When she calls I always seem to lose my cool. Baby, I'm just a moth to your plane. And don't you know that loving you is a train wreck waiting to happen.
And now, just for good measure, let's hear that again. So as you guys see, that was just only a test, and now we're just putting the rest of the parts back on, which is here, this radiator. And since the airbox was on, we have to take that off so we can put back the radiator hose. Got the old hose back on and put a new clamp for good measure. Now that the upper radiator hose is on, all we gotta do is put the airbox back on. I can smell this car being almost finished, and now we're just gotta put up the upper radiator support. Gotta put the bumper back on because we took this off to make things easier to work on the car. Using Asian specified coolant. Yep. Cap. Can't forget that. Now putting the hood release cable back onto the hood latch support. I'm not sure on what this thing is called. The customer or the family member in this question actually had a different colored bumper, so that has to go back on. And that's pretty much everything. And by the way, the grill was actually already broken, but that's it, and we're done. Now, if you guys made it this far into the video, I appreciate you guys watching this long. And on top of that, consider giving this channel a subscribe and a like, and definitely hit that bell notification just because it'll help us out. Like I said, I just started this channel. We're planning on doing some fun things here, vlogging and all that. And if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, just feel free to let me know. I'll read them. You guys have a good one. And again, my name is Speedy. This is Mechanic Bill, and consider a subscribe. Later, guys.